Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're talking about to help or not to help. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was really good and really hilarious, mostly because I started watching a show, which I'm late to this party, but Dairy Girls. Have you seen it?
Oh, I haven't seen it, but I've seen when the Dairy Girls went on the Great British Baking Show.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that either, so I need to get with that.
Okay.
And I think I don't know. I don't know why I had not watched it, but it is absolutely hilarious. Nearly made me lose my mind laughing. And it's also interesting because it's the same time period that I was in secondary school.
Oh.
So even though I grew up in the Republic of Ireland, so we did not have quite the same experience, it's very evocative of that time period and just what it's like going to school in the mid-90s in Ireland. So it's pretty hilarious. And
that is awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds
I'm all
great.
about it. So it was really
fun.
good. Yes. And then a student watched it and was like, what's going on politically? And then I think they got more than they bargained for. I've been easily derailed in class talking about Irish history before and been like, oh, whoa, that kind of derailed things. But anyway.
Back to physics. That's funny.
Yeah. Sometimes they get more than bargained for.
Uh-huh.
But then I had a teacher in school and we knew how to get her off topic. And so maybe they're just actually doing it on purpose.
Well, maybe they'll learn some Irish history while they're trying to get you off topic. That
exactly, yes.
Yeah.
We're all playing the game. I'm like secretly have an agenda. They have an agenda. It's all working.
It's all a game.
Tell me, how was your week?
My week was good. I've been remembering how great it is to do one thing at a time. Oh. And it used to be one of the things that... I had an alarm on my phone that reminded me one thing at a time, but then I forgot. But I've recently remembered. And it's just so much more relaxing and peaceful. And so 2 examples. One is I'm in lab, and, a student's like, oh, we're out of HCl. And someone else is like, here's this flask that you can use to make my unknown. And someone else is like, I have a question. And it's just really nice to be like, I don't have to drop getting the new hydrochloric acid bottle to make the unknown. I'll just go finish getting the hydrochloric acid bottle, just remembering to finish the one thing and then do the next thing. And that's really nice. And then another example is I was kind of feeling like with research, one step in my research is to go 7 hours south to a university that has this fancy instrument that we need. And I was kind of like, well, I only want to go there once, so I need to get everything ready to go and for all these different projects, and it was kind of just crazy. And then Ralph was like, well, what if you just finish this one project and then we do the second project? And I was like, oh, that sounds so much nicer. Yes, so just do the project, go to Santa Cruz, finish the project, get the next samples. And then, the wonderful thing about that is like, okay, yeah, you're going there twice, but maybe something didn't go right the first time, and then you can just rerun it the second. That's probably going to happen. And it's just a million times more relaxed. So anyway, I'm into it.
There's so much, it can just get too much when you have this pressure about efficiency.
Right.
And it's, I'm the queen of the lazy man's load. I'm always trying to take all the groceries in one go and just drop everything. And I just won't learn that.
And then you broke the glass bottle and you have to clean it up. And it would have actually been more efficient to do 7 loads.
Totally. But I love that, the simplicity of you could just go twice to there. And it's just, it's this idea that no, but you have to streamline everything and everything has maximum productivity. And
it's actually not.
No, totally.
And it's so much more relaxing if you don't try to do maximum product. Yeah.
Yeah, because kids at home, and my 3rd grader is borderline getting more independent, but the kindergartner, we just need to do everything together. And I don't know, if I just turn off my phone and don't look at anything and just focus on her, everything goes smoothly for a couple of hours, or even an hour, 90 minutes, and then put my phone back on. And I don't I know that, But then if I'm like half looking at my email and half trying to write the thing and do the thing,
Right.
it's just never effective and never efficient.
Did anything blow up in that hour and a half that you weren't checking your email? Probably not.
No. I don't do chemistry. That's why nothing blew up. But yeah, you can't be totally like, well, I'm just going to wander out the lab and not do anything. But yes.
I remember when I was at you had this summer activity for summer research students and had them write out all their fears for the summer.
Oh.
And the chemistry ones were all worried about things blowing up. And you were like, well, okay, that's not something we have to worry about in my lab, but in Claire's lab, I don't know, you'll have to talk to her.
Yeah, that is actually quite dangerous. So please don't blow anything up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Man.
I remember that. Okay.
So I have a quote
related
related to doing one thing at a time, which is from Confucius. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. So just a reminder that it doesn't have to be 20 things at once, because you can just do one at once. Much less complicated.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to carry this with me into this week.
Great.
This is where
really
the reflective...
so much more relaxing.
Totally, but it's like, this is where I appreciate this podcast and the reflective aspect.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Because it's like, you know when people just, like even, I've seen like some things about self-defense, and you're like, oh, that totally, like, it's not totally new information, but, and once you think about it, you're like, that totally makes sense. Mm-hmm. But it's like, you don't, like, it's even when you're saying do one thing at a time, like, I have heard that before and I've tried it before, but you still need to be reminded.
Yes.
You know, and
totally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, tell me, what are we talking about today?
So we're talking about the balance of helping students move towards the correct answer versus letting them figure it out, and how there are benefits of both. And so I really do feel like it's a balance, and there's a time and a place for both. So I'm interested in hearing more about that from you.
Yeah.
So what's working for you in that balance?
What's working for me is, I think, and I'm thinking about this particular class, which is the first in the physics sequence.
Okay.
And I think I have really good assignments that sort of lead them to like build their confidence.
Okay, that's
awesome.
awesome.
So it starts out with easy things and it gets better, and so I think that scaffolding really helps them get to harder problems and get more confident. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm really good at cheerleading students.
Nice.
And sort of like, you can do it, let's do it, and helping them along and really positive attitude. So I think I do those things well, for sure. Yeah.
Cool. I love it.
I have more to say about working on. But,
okay.
yeah.
No, cheerleading, I mean, I think it's really important to give them confidence that you have confidence that they can do it,
Right.
and help them get through the struggles of working through these awesome homework problems that are going to build up their abilities. And I also love that you're building up their abilities and confidence, starting with easy and going to harder. I think that's great, especially in the intro classes.
Totally. And I think it's really good. And I think, okay, I have more to say later on. Never mind. I'm not going to go negative yet. So you tell me, what's working for you? Okay,
so what's working for me, I think this balance works really well in the lab. I would say in general, but I only have experience with my analytical classes, where I think there's lots of discovery that the students are making as they go through the lab experiments. And I feel like I can often help freely and yet not get in the way of them figuring things out themselves.
Oh.
So, like, usually they have to make a bunch of solutions and they have to make them accurately, and then they run into some problem along the way. They realize it's a problem, they think about it, they come ask me about the problem, and then we talk through it together, and they decide what to do. Maybe they remake the solution, or maybe they realize that they can fix it in some other way or whatever. And I just feel like I can be very free and tell them all my thoughts about their particular problem, and by doing that, I'm kind of modeling how to think through the problem. And I don't think I'm taking away their learning experience by doing that, because they still are thinking about it. It's still their individual problem that they ran into, and they're deciding what to do about it. And, it could be something like, whoops, I was supposed to add 500 milliliters, but I added more. What should I do now? We think through, well, what would be the problems if it was too dilute? Do we really need this to be really accurate? And I think because it's their particular problem, they are thinking it through, and they are,
That's
and then they
super
decide what to
cool.
do, and then they have to go, adjust the procedure accordingly or remake the solution or whatever they have to do. So I feel like they are really getting the figuring it out themselves, even if I give them all my thoughts. And I like to give them all my thoughts because then they have, like I say, we're modeling how to think about it. They can take all the thoughts and decide what to do. So I really feel like that balance works really well in the lab.
I love that because, like you said, I think they're all individual problems that are unique to them.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
because that's one thing that does suck when you're talking to one group and you're like, here's how to do all the steps, and you're sort of catering to them, and then someone else is listening in.
Right.
You know what I mean? But that's not going to happen in your situation
Sure.
because they have unique problems. So
someone else is listening in and they're like, oh man, I should be sure not to overfill mine because that's too complicated or whatever,
I don't want to have to solve that problem. So.
But here's my problem. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I really feel like the students individually or in groups going through and figuring out how to make the solutions and do the analytical chemistry is just so much of them figuring things out that I can help them fully, and it's really nice. So I really like that.
Yeah, I love that.
Totally.
And that's cool. And then they also have this sort of ownership and motivation of
Right.
solving the problem because
sure. And then they have to review it later because, if they did make the solution more dilute for some reason, then in their calculations after the lab and in their write-up, they're going to have to take that into account. So it comes up, it just keeps coming up. So, I think it works really well. Labs are awesome, I guess, is the conclusion.
They are awesome. And, I think, I've struggled with sort of what is the purpose of them.
Uh-huh.
And actually through that whole reflection about utility value has really helped me figure out what I think the purpose is. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's been helpful.
So what are you working on?
I just can't handle, I'm very uncomfortable with people struggling. So I'm an over-helper for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what my struggle, I generally, that's my struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And then also being online, I think it's just created more struggle for me in that realm. And I think a couple of things. One is I feel very pushed for time in my student interactions.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's just quicker to be like, yeah. And then you want to multiply by 5. Okay, bye. I'll be back in a minute. And so it's kind of, you know what I mean? Like I'm not able to.
Sure. You're just like, oh yeah, you should multiply your answer by 5. Oh, look, now you're done. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not as much like, and then it's just the nuance of being in a room with 8 groups. Mm-hmm. And being able to kind of tune into who needs help with what. And, okay, that group's going to need a bit more help. I can kind of camp out over there and sort of chime in with them. Or these people need a lot of moral support or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's so different in the breakout rooms to just go from room to room. And, people do call you for help, but it's very hard to just be you can't just sort of eavesdrop on wow, they're still only on question 1. I need to get over there and help them. Or these guys are zipping along, they're fine. And I think I've told you before, my office hours have become kind of me just working out problems. Mm-hmm. And I do a little bit of okay, and what do you think this is going to be? And it's always the same person who answers.
Do you have a lot of people in your office hours? Is that the problem?
I have. It's sort of weird. It's enough people that there's some lurkers, but not enough to really effectively put them into breakout rooms and say, okay, you go work on this. I'll come in and check with you. So
sure.
I don't know. So I think I definitely, and maybe it's okay, right? Because this is a slightly, hopefully, temporary phenomenon that we're doing this. And so maybe it's not the end of the world, but I definitely notice there's a lot of stuff that we do that is sort of undescribable isn't the word, but I can't even articulate quite. Just being in that room and being able to tune into who needs what. And I don't because when you're in class, it's not like you regimentally go, I'm walking from group 1 to 2 and now I'm going to move on to group. It's, much more, you do it by sort of intuition than that.
Yeah, and you're seeing who looks grumpy or upset or who looks confused or who's only on question 1. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then they kind of eavesdrop on each other sometimes.
Right.
They're like, oh, wait, did you get question 2? Or... or sometimes, when you just okay, pause everything. I'm going to do some stuff on the board because no one understands this one thing. Or, so, I think I really miss that sort of flexibility. And that really feels connected to helping and not helping.
Totally.
And both at the time of not necessarily having the time to wait for people to figure it out and being like, yes, okay, moving along quickly and kind of scooting them along to hurry up. And then also not being able to dial in to individual people as much, you know, and kind of more like, okay, look, here, all three of you, I don't even know who's on which part. This is how you do this question, move it on. Instead of like, hey, I'm going to take you off to the side because you seem like you're falling behind. Or, you know what I mean? So I just...
Totally.
It feels like a very coarse-grained approach right now. For sure.
Okay, well, I have a couple thoughts. One is that on GatherTown, it's a little bit easier to tune into people because you can just walk around and you kind of eavesdrop as you're walking on the different groups. And also, it's easier to say, you just go into a little space where you're announcing to everyone and you're like, come back to the main room, and they come back to the main room and you're like, okay, guys, you are all having trouble with number 3. Let's talk about number 3, and then you run them back. And also, I haven't actually told them this, that they can do this, but they could, if like a group is stuck, they could just like step to the next group and kind of hear what they're saying and then step back if they wanted to. So anyway, that's one thought of potentially...
Okay, you're going to have to take a day where you're going to teach me how to use GatherTown.
Okay.
And is it cumbersome to bring them back to somewhere? Because I know Zoom, but even sometimes the breakout rooms, you're like, can I just come and go and not have the 2 minutes of like letting people know, or you know what I mean?
I mean, there is a little bit of time because you have to go into the little space where you're announcing to everybody, and then you say, come back to the room, and they come back to the room. I find it faster than Zoom, and much easier to just go back and forth. And yeah, and one thing that I have been doing is each group have a Google Doc with the questions that they're working on and their answers. So I can click on the Google Doc and see where each group is at and then be like, oh, guys, you should look back at number 2. What you have there, you were thinking something wrong or whatever.
Oh, wait, I love that. Okay.
And you could do that on Zoom, of course, too. The Google Doc is really nice. And what I haven't done, but what I'd like to do is have like a master Google Doc that's like the answers that are going to slowly be revealed, because normally I write them on the board, but it could be on the master Google Doc that everybody could have that I slowly add. So that's one thought. The other thought about office hours, one thing that I did, because last semester I had a similar problem where I'd have lots of people at office hours. They wanted to ask different things. Well, anyway, what I ended up doing that maybe would work for you, the scenario you're describing is like, you know, person A is like, I would love to go over question 4 on the homework. And you're like, sweet. And then maybe person B is like, oh man, I would love to hear this too, so go ahead. I kind of consider person A as the one who asked about that problem, the person that I'm working with. And so we're going to go through question 4, but I'm going to be asking person A, okay, what formula do we start with? You know, like working one-on-one with that person. But everyone else can listen, but we're still like having some back and forths. And then if anyone else had a question, of course, they could chime in. But that way I feel like, okay, the lurkers are benefiting, but we're still getting some back and forths and people are seeing and the process, you know?
Yeah, and even if someone isn't answering that question, they might be on the inside. You know, if you're like...
Right, they're thinking about it. Like, if you sit there and person A is considering what formula, whoever the lurker is hopefully also thinking about the formula.
Right.
And I don't know, I mean, yeah, I don't mind lurkers too much, but we do have the difference where you have accuracy is grading for your homework, and I can totally see why you have that, but that does make it a little bit more of a problem for the lurkers. But at least they're thinking about it and seeing the process. You know,
do you know what would be so cool?
And if they're coming and showing up to office hours,
totally.
You know.
Yeah, I think I'm giving them too much negative intent. But one thing that I don't even know if I would do this or how to do this, but one thing that seems like it would be cool is if everyone had different numbers. And even if people were lurking and not necessarily super engaged, they would at some point have to go and actually work it out themselves.
Yeah, I mean, if it seems like for those problems, working it out themselves with different numbers would be beneficial, then that might be worth it. Seems like a lot of work. I don't know if it'd be worth it, but it depends on how meaningful you think it would be for them to go through with their own numbers.
it's kind of funny sometimes. Like sometimes I feel genuinely, and I think like I've heard of other people having this like sort of phobic about going back. Like it feels quite overwhelming. And then something about this discussion is just making me like, I do really want to go back. Like sometimes you're like, oh, this is going to be hard to like figure out how to get back into teaching face to face. And then I'm like, man, I forgot about all of these things and the sort of subtleties of being able to tune into who's in front of you. And yeah.
I really love looking at the sea of faces in the classroom when I'm lecturing and being like, are they asleep? Are they interested? Are they confused? You know, just get a general assessment. I wonder if we could use little emojis or something and they could just...
We get them to all tune their Fitbits in or something. And we can like monitor their vital signs or something. Like, we're losing them. She's going into REM sleep. We need to mix it up. Okay, so tell me, what are you working on with this?
So I'm working on, again in the lab, like vast majority of the time, this works really well in the lab, and I love it. But I do sometimes have trouble with this balance of helping students versus letting them figure it out when they're moving really slowly.
Oh, yeah.
And it sounds like the same problem you were talking about, where if they're moving very slowly, I'm like, we got to move along here. I need to give you some information. You're not going to be able to get done in time unless we stop thinking about step one, you know? So like, here's the answer to step one. Now go do it. So yeah, I sometimes want to give them more help than I think optimally I should so that I can help them get the experiment done in time. But I think that, like, the reason that that's a problem, because it feels weird, because most of the time in the lab, I don't think it's a big deal for me to give them lots of information. They still have to figure it out. They still have to go do it. They still have to deal with their problems. But the issue is that I think the reason they're moving slowly is that it takes them a while to figure out what to do and how to do it. And so what they should be doing is practicing figuring out what to do and how to do it. And so if I'm like, gosh, guys, you can't still be figuring out what to do. You need to move along. Here's what you do. I'm completely cutting them away from the very thing that's making them slow, that they should be practicing, you know?
Oh, dude, that's so tricky, right? Because if you could wave a magic wand, it would be go back 12 hours, review this, be ready to do it.
Right, sure. And you hopefully can say, okay, guys, you were not prepared. That's why you are so far behind in this lab. The lesson is be prepared for next lab. And that sometimes works.
Do you say that to them?
Well, not quite as directly, but yes, I do say, like, you need to figure out how to be faster next time. Think about these calculations in advance, come with a plan, those kind of things. And sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't work. Yeah. So I wonder...
That's tricky, because it's like... Because you hope that they just get the message. Mm-hmm. And this maybe is more punitive than I thought I was, but is there something like if you fell on your face and didn't finish the lab and didn't get all the points, would you be like, okay, now I'm going to have to be more prepared for next time?
Well, so what I said to the most recent group that had this problem, they did not get through a lot of the lab, and they were like, are we going to lose points? And what I said was, you won't this time, but you need to figure out how to get through the lab by being more prepared in the future. And they were more prepared the next time, but then they were
sweet, okay.
Yeah, you know. So, but I was wondering if maybe instead of helping them, because then, like, when I see that they're not going to make it, I start, like, zooming them along by giving them all this information that I think they would really benefit from discovering themselves. So I wonder if instead just accept the fact that they're not going to make it through the lab. And like, I think it might be that they're going to get more benefit from doing half the lab at their speed than doing the whole lab with me zooming them along, you know? I don't know what that means in terms of grades, but I think in terms of learning, that might be better.
Dude, I literally feel like I could argue either side of that argument.
Interesting. Okay.
Like, it's so tricky, right? Because sometimes... I don't know, sometimes they're just so plodding along and focusing on the wrong things.
Sure, if they're going the wrong direction. But if they're going the right direction really slowly,
I know.
They need to practice going the right direction.
But do you think, okay, so say if they only did half the lab, and then they do lose some points, would they go back and finish the whole lab calculations themselves? Like,
well, they couldn't do that because
Right.
they need to get the data while they're in the lab for my class. So like if they don't, that's why I'm rushing them through it, because I'm like, once you have the data, you have the data, and hopefully you figure it out, how whatever you were missing that made you not able to get the data in the lab period. But at least if we can use this 3-hour lab period and you can leave with the data, you have what you need to complete the report. But
I think-
they kind of don't, because they don't have the understanding that they would have gotten if they, yeah, you know what I mean?
I think you already have a perfect solution.
What's that?
I think your perfect solution is, okay, you guys, I'm throwing you a life vest right now. We're going to zip through this lab, but this is not effective, and I'm not doing this again. You need to be ready for next week. I think that's fine. I think if you held their hand and zoomed them along every time, then yes, you're maybe damaging
That's a good point.
their opportunity
That's a
to
good point.
learn. But I think like one rescue is
One
completely
rescue.
legit.
And a rescue, as long as they are aware this is a rescue. And it's either a rescue by me zooming them along or a rescue by me saying, cut out the last section of the lab and get the rest of it done.
Yeah.
And, whatever is more appropriate for that lab. But as long as, yes, you're right. If they know this is a rescue, you guys were not prepared enough. You need to have a different plan and enact it for next time. But you've been rescued for this time. Yeah,
And
I like that.
Well, and I think I really struggle with sometimes the balance of supporting different learners. And some people just are real to get into all the details and they figure all the stuff out. But then they need to meet an hour before your lab and be like having those sort of tortoise discussions
Right.
beforehand and knowing that about themselves or something,
Right.
so it's not necessarily whatever. But
Totally.
this is the
Totally.
parameters. So I think you already have a perfect solution. I think...
Well, I think you're convincing me that it is a good solution. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, if you kind of scoop people along quickly on one thing, it's not really, like, you're doing a much better job than I am. I'm just like, oh, fine, I'll just do it for you, just like move over it. So that's not effective. But I think, it is important that they get it done in a certain amount of time and be better prepared.
Yes.
And so I think that's kind of modeling that for them. Like, okay, we're going to have to skip some steps and scoot along here and here we go. And then we're not doing this anymore. This is the last time you're going to do this. So I think that's kind of perfect.
Cool. I think I'm feeling much better about it now. So
Okay,
thank you.
sweet. Cool. Yeah. Cool. I think I'm going to give myself a little bit of, not a total pass. And I definitely want to sort of work on this for next semester. And next semester I'm going to be teaching an upper division class online. And
Oh,
it's
really?
not
A different one?
I know.
Interesting.
Jeepers, yeah. Yeah.
Why
it's gonna
aren't you
be-
teaching the same class?
I'm teaching 3 classes in the fall. And yeah, because there's only one lab section. Anyway, there's
Anyway, you're
all sorts
teaching
of-
more.
but,
Yeah. Okay.
and so it certainly will not be appropriate for me to be like, it's not really appropriate anytime. So, but I'm going to not totally harass myself about it because someday we'll be back in person
Yeah.
and then I can sort of rely a little bit more on my person to person intuition and
Totally. And in the meantime,
Yeah.
we do what we can. And I think it is totally fine if some of the lurkers get in. Again, they came to office hours. That's
a really good
awesome.
point.
And they're listening to you explain the problem. Awesome.
Right. And it's infinitely better than looking it up on that site that sounds like egg, or watching
Right.
a YouTube video.
Right.
And so I know, and
They're doing the
sometimes
correct thing. And so they
Right.
should get the correct information. And
I really appreciate that reframing because I think I get stuck sometimes in like, who's trying to get something for free or like, it's just ridiculous. So yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Sweet. Okay. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.